Hi there guys, and welcome to another episode of the Cover Zero Show with me, your host Simon Conboy. Today's episode is reviewing the first of the two Monday night football games where the New Orleans Saints and Adrian Peterson went to Minnesota and ended up getting shellacked, frankly. Vikings won this game handily. I'm just going to go over my thoughts on the game, the performances and the game planning, and discuss that before going through what I think for this means for both teams heading into week 2. So we'll start with what I guess is the same old situation. We'll start with the Vikings offense and the Saints defenses. Well, the Vikings absolutely dominated the vast majority of this game. It was a slow start. Both teams in the first quarter just having long drives, ending in field goals. That was really the Saints' issue for the whole game. Every time they got a drive going, they hit the red zone and they would stall. Whereas the Vikings, they managed to make, a ton of big plays in the passing game. Bradford absolutely shredded the Saints' secondary, particularly in the second half, where the Saints just looks like the Saints that we've become used to over the last 3 years, unable to stop anything. As a result, the lead was just too much. The field goals, the Saints, I think, end up kicking 3, maybe even 4, just weren't enough to keep up. And in the end, it was a very comfortable win for the Vikings. On the offensive side, the Vikings, the big surprise for me, the offensive line, they performed very well. The run blocking wasn't absolutely superb, but it was adequate. It allowed them to put themselves into reasonable situations over the course of the game and managed to convert a couple of third downs that way. But the pass protection was vastly superior to what I expected, having been awful last season. Bradford was under siege. It looked pretty bad in pre-season. Today, that looked very good. Cam Jordan had a sack. But other than that, not too much pressure on Bradford. Bradford showed some good mobility, escaping the pocket when he had to. And frankly, he had a pretty comfortable game in the pocket. And that allowed him to shred this Saints secondary. It's been a problem for a while. PJ Williams hasn't got a huge amount of experience. He's got some talent. And then you've got a safety in Marcus Williams. And then rookie and Marshawn Lattimore in the secondary. That ended up being too much for the Saints to overcome. They weren't able to contain these receivers. Stephon Diggs had a really big first half. Made a couple of plays in the second half as well. Adam Thielen kept finding wide open spaces on the field. He made a number of massive gains in this game. And the second half in particular, and towards the end, it was really about halfway through the second quarter that the Saints defense just fell apart. And we're used to this at this point. It's how it's been for a few years now. They held up okay against the run until sort of the end of the game. Dalvin Cook's numbers ended up looking really nice because of a big run for 33 at the end of the game to set the Vikings rookie record. As I say, they ran the ball okay. It was fine. It wasn't spectacular by any means, but Bradford was just able to do what he wanted to this Saints defense. So he ended up putting up pretty monstrous numbers. I think Adam Thielen went for well over 100 as well. Stephon Diggs had a couple of touchdowns, including a really, really nice stop on a go route, or sort of go stop in the end zone. Great body control and a really good grab in some contested coverage. Too often in this game, there were just Vikings receivers running absolutely wide open. Diggs managed to make them pay on a couple of short passes, turning them up the field. Those you can forgive, but some of the Adam Thielen catches I mentioned, he was just smoking people left and right, and there were a lot of easy completions down the field, which is not what you should be seeing at this level. I think the Saints have to be massively concerned. This has been the case for a long time, and it was more of the same. And frankly, these rookies are going to struggle. PJ Williams, whilst he's been in the league a while, is not an experienced player. You've got 3 guys in that secondary, and Vaccaro, who I don't like in coverage. That's going to be a huge problem over the course of the year. I still don't think they've got enough speed at linebacker to be particularly effective covering there. I think we saw that there were a lot of underneath routes that ended up popping for first downs, getting too much yardage after the catch. And the Vikings basically just made the adjustments. They went into this game clearly looking to attack over the middle, and I think they were very much testing the offensive line early in the game to see how well they'd hold up. The run game wasn't getting anywhere. Cook had a couple of nice runs over the course of the game, but the Saints did a good enough job containing it, not letting him get outside too often. Let's say he broke one right at the end of the game to set the record, but at that point it was all kind of redundant. The game was well out of hand. And the protections were holding up. They were hitting short passes. As I say, they got Diggs on a couple of drag routes. And in the second quarter, once they opened up the passing game, the floodgates just opened up, and it didn't look like slowing down. It really feels to me like if the Vikings had decided to absolutely pour it on, they could have done so. Wasn't nearly enough pass rush from the Saints. They weren't quite aggressive enough in it. It still feels like Cam Jordan's the only reliable pass rusher they have. He got a couple of pressures and, as I mentioned earlier, a nice sack in the game. Alex Okafor didn't do enough. Sheldon Rankins was very quiet in this one in terms of any kind of disruption. I think that might not be a great sign considering how many new starters were on this Vikings offensive line. It makes sense there's so many new ones. They were that bad last year. Tearing it down and totally rebuilding it makes perfect sense, and it looks significantly better. I've got to give a lot of credit to Pat Elflein, the rookie. I think he had an exceptional first game. Didn't see too many communication problems. He made a couple of nice blocks in the run game, and as I say, the pass protection was stout throughout. Bradford, this might be one of his best performances as a pro, if not his best performance. He was on the money throughout the night. It started out looking like a typical Vikings game from last year. Very dinky dunk, very quick, not looking to take any risks. There were so many checkdowns to Dalvin Cook in the first few drives that I was really concerned they weren't going to be able to take advantage of this young Saints secondary properly. But once they started to attack there, it feels like they were feeling out the offensive line once they had some confidence in it. It was one-way traffic through the air. We saw... It's hard to even say sometimes it was guys getting beat. The Stephon Diggs touchdown, the first one, that was just a case of... You saw the corner come in on the play action and the safety as well. So Diggs just runs up the field and there's absolutely no one there. On the broadcast, I know the corner was criticised, and there's a mistake on both, but the safety is the guy who's more responsible. At the end of the day, you're the last line of defence. It looked to me like a zone coverage. It looked like a cover 2. So in that case, the corner does have the flat, and whilst he should also sync with that route because of where it's headed, and the safety wasn't in a great position with the way things were lined up. The safety may have had a hard time catching up. They've both made the mistake there. You've got to put it on both of them, and that's just a coverage breakdown. These sorts of things happened a couple more times. As I say, Adam Thielen had a great game. He was wide open a lot of the time. A lot of the time. Whenever he made a catch, it seemed he was wide open. We're talking like some down the field stuff, like 20 odd yards down the field. So that's just not good enough. The linebackers couldn't run with Diggs. We should expect, but that's not good. Kyle Rudolph had a good touchdown. Again, they were overly aggressive going after the passer, not getting the pressure from it, and that was an easy throw. So, yeah, very, very, very promising, I think, for the Vikings. The receiving group, Phelan looks like a legit player to me. I said over the course of the off-season, I thought he showed me enough at the end of last year that I think they've got a good, if not particularly explosive, 1-2 punch. While Phelan was getting open deep here, and if he can keep using his route running abilities and his intelligence to find holes like that, then this Vikings team has to feel pretty good. Rudolph is a perfectly fine tight end. If they can get anything out of Laquan Treadwell, this could end up being a dangerous group. The offensive line, I want to see it tested against some better teams, see how they hold up before I make too many judgments there. But definitely an incredibly promising performance from them. Got to be happy there. Dalvin Cook looked good. Had a couple of drops, which isn't ideal, of course, but I don't think that's going to be a huge problem going forward. I still think he's going to be an asset in that side in that regard. I thought he ran the ball well. He was tough. He was decisive. Managed to use his speed to get to the outside on a couple of occasions when that was there, but I don't think he was looking for it all the time, which is often a concern I've got with young running backs. He was happy to look for holes up the middle, take the 3-4 yards when it was there. So I think that was real promising. And yeah, Bradford was great. Got to come away with this game. I mean, him and the receivers just worked at will. If you're the Saints, major concerns. The run defense looked okay. It ended up worse than it was, but I think that was partly down to situations and that one big run. So that maybe not such bad. AJ Klein looked really, really good against the run. I thought he had a pretty nice debut for the Saints, but this secondary is what it comes down to, and there just wasn't enough pass rush either. So once again, the Saints pass defense has to go down as a major concern. I think they're going to have problems with the safeties in particular. We saw some really bad bites on the play action from this team. They were far too aggressive. That may have stemmed from the lack of pass rush that they were getting from the front overall, but I just, the amount of times you saw guys in the secondary, including Vaccaro, just taking a step up on that play action rather than being disciplined and allowing guys to get in behind them, that's massively concerning to me. Hard to see it getting better in the immediate future. As I say, these guys are just very, very young. So that's a problem. And it's a new linebacking group as well. So coverage, I think, is going to just be something that's going to take a while to gel with these guys. I'm not surprised to have seen them struggle, even with, they were impressive in the preseason, but teams weren't throwing the kind of stuff at them the Vikings were today, and they struggled to deal with it. And it's got to be a concern. It's been that way for so long. No immediate dividends today, and that might be the case for the short-term future. I like Lattimore a hell of a lot as a player. In fact, I quite like a lot of the players in this secondary, but it doesn't look like they're quite ready to become a top unit yet. On the other side of the ball, the Vikings defence, we knew going in that they were a really good unit. Similarly with the Saints, my one concern heading into this for the Saints was just the lack of depth in the receiving core with the Willie Snead injury. They're pretty thin there. Michael Thomas, I think, is a really promising player heading into year 2. But other than that, I mean, Ted Ginn is what he is. He's just a guy who's going to make a couple of deep catches over the course of a game. Kobe Fleener's mediocre. And was it Tommy Lee Lewis was the other guy who we don't know too much about. So that was a concern. I think that ended up coming to the fore. The passing game was not as proficient as we're used to seeing. A lot of credit has to go to the Vikings defence as well. They were incredibly good, particularly once it got to the red zone areas, just clamping down on this passing game and keeping everything in front of them, making tackles. That's normally where Breeze gets you. You give him opportunities to go intermediate and deep. He finds every one of them and takes them. The Vikings did a good job keeping everything in front of them today, getting to the ball and tackling. I thought Eric Kendricks had a really nice game. Started off hot. The defensive line played well. Everson Griffin was too much for Ryan Ramczyk to handle. It wasn't a bad first start by any means, going up against a guy of that talent. He managed to hold him off a couple of times, but Griffin hit him with a great spin move at one point. for a sack and was able to generate some pretty constant pressure. The interior of the line held up really well. It was tough sledding for the Saints in the run game. They had some success early, especially when they were really heavily rotating the free backs like they did on the first couple of drives. I think that kind of relentless pace in changing the backs and switching it up is something that they really should have stuck with. They didn't. They tended to really were looking to feature Kamara as they tried to get back into the game, and I understand that in regards to he's clearly the guy in passing situations as I would have expected and hoped heading into the season. Frankly, I think he offers a lot more there than Ingram and Peterson do, but tonight they did a great job bottling him up. He had his opportunities in the passing game, but this Vikings defence was swarming. Very difficult today for the Saints to get any kind of yardage after the catch. Vikings were playing fast, and they did a real good job for the majority of the game getting pressure on Breeze. The Zach Streif injury, I think, was a big point in the game, having to take out their most experienced tackle. So you basically got a rookie and a backup at the tackle spots against this defence with some issues on it. The interior didn't do a great job either today, so that's that. I mean, I'm not used to seeing Breeze get hit nearly as much as he was today. He was forced to hold on to the ball a bit longer by some of the underneath coverage, which I think was exceptional. These Vikings linebackers are good football players, and Xavier Rhodes, he did a job. He missed a few snaps with cramping, but he did a job on Michael Thomas. He was basically a non-factor in this game. Kobe Fleener did a lot better than I would have thought. He made a couple of nice grabs. But yeah, the run game was clearly a focal point. It's clear the Saints wanted to establish that. I think in particular with the receiving issues at the moment with Snead missing. And it just never got going. Adrian Peterson was used very little. Just basically had a few runs up the gut. Didn't really get too much out of those. Ingram looked pretty sharp early, but then just wasn't able to get anything going. But outside of those first couple of drives, really, the Saints' run game was just bogged down all night. They weren't able to pop anything, and weren't able to create any space outside for Kamara. And as a result, you had Breeze in a lot of unfortunate situations as a passer, and this line wasn't able to hold up. These receivers didn't do a good enough job getting open. Breeze didn't have his best game, but he didn't get a whole lot of help around him. As I say, the Vikings' game plan was a simple one. I think they were relying heavily on the linebackers to play a good disciplined game, where they had to read what was going on with very quickly, but they did a great job getting to the run plays when they were called. The defensive line did a good enough job stacking things up to make their lives pretty easy, and when they were in pass coverage, swarmed to the ball very quickly. As I said, the line was getting its pressure consistently, so it was a pretty complete performance from the Vikings defence. They're a really good unit. Even with Willie Snead missing, this Saints offence is still very, very dangerous, and I feel they did a great job holding it in check. From the Saints' perspective, you could see what they were trying to do over the course of this game, trying to utilise those running backs, try and tire these guys out, have some longer drives, rather than being the sort of all-out air show in the hurry-up that we've seen from them, trying to get some play action going. The run game was never successful enough for that to happen. I think they were trying to avoid Xavier Rhodes. Michael Thomas, as a result, had a quiet game, and frankly, the rest of the guys on the in the lineup just weren't able to get it done. Got to be concerned with the pass protection. If Streif is out for any particular period of time, Teron Armstead's still not going to be back for a while, so that's worrying. And yeah, I think, as I say, not too concerned with Breeze. I think he looked okay, but saw today he's going to need better pass protection to get anything out of this passing game in the future. The run game, I think they'll have better days. I think there were some promising signs early in the game when they were executing, but I think in the end they were just overmanned by what looks like it's going to once again be a very high quality Vikings defence if guys can stay healthy. Really impressed with how they played. So yeah, sort of in summation, great performance by the Vikings. I'm not sure they could have hoped for a much better performance in week one. The offense played well, the defense played great, passing game and offensive line were massive improvements on last year. So, yeah, couldn't have been much better for them. The Saints, it's really a little bit of same old. I don't see much difference between them. The offensive line has to be a bit of a concern at the moment, as does some of the depth of these receiving weapons. So I think the Saints offense might... I mean, if this defense can't improve quickly, then they're in trouble, because this offense does have more question marks than it's had over the last few years. I'm sure they're still going to be productive regardless, but they've got less depth in the receiving core, even when Snead comes back, than what we used to. They don't really have a game breaker there at wide receiver. I guess Ted Ginn can catch some deep ones, but there's no sort of every down threat other than Michael Thomas at this point. The run game, I think, is going to be a huge deal. We're going to have to see how they perform, say, against some of the lesser teams. So I'm not sure this was the night for them. I think New England's going to be a big test for them next week. It's going to be very interesting to see how those two teams come out after losses where both of their offenses really did disappoint and both their defenses got shredded. So that's going to be a fascinating watch. Vikings, they move on. They've got to feel good. So I look forward to seeing if they can continue that, because based on this performance, they could be a real contender. They looked fantastic. So let me know, what did you guys think of the game? Anything you feel like I missed out? Anything you want to say? Do so. We've got the comment section below, the Cover Zero Facebook page. Find me on Twitter at Simon Conboy. Always happy to discuss ball. And as ever, thank you so much for watching. If you could like, share, subscribe, check out the Patreon, all that good stuff, it'd be greatly appreciated. Got plenty of other game reviews, going to be previewing a bunch of games, and we've got the round table, which is basically me and a few of my mates talking about every single game that happened on Sunday. And we'll do another episode, hopefully, where we talk about every upcoming game, as well as these more detailed preview and review episodes with myself. So check some of that stuff out, be greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for watching. It's been a pleasure as always. Have a great day. And go Bucks.